All right, so let's start by working with a model and show you how the interface functions. So we're just going to import some geometry. And this is going to be a very simple model. It's just a little piston. One of the things you'll notice is when we import geometry, obviously we can see we have our gravity symbol in the background there, is it creates center of mass symbols for every part. In the tree, you'll see here is our model that we've started with. We've imported this geometry. And under each part, we'll see some interesting components. We have our rigid representation, which has that solid geometry in it, along with any interface points, in this case, the center of mass. So this is our motion rigid rep. The reason we have this broken out separately under the part is because we can have multiple reps. We can have a solid rep, we can have different flex body reps. At the minute we're limited to one in this first release, but that will expand over time. And if you do an information on this, you'll see much the same information if you're familiar with Adams View that you would see there. And you can interact, you can modify this to override the mass properties so that instead of coming from a material, you can enter them in manually, so it's quite flexible in that respect. This tree view we can either hide or we can dock it to the side of the screen, so when you get into larger models, docking it this way is a bit more convenient. You notice there's a variety of tabs here. We have, I'll just expand it fully out. So we have all the way through here, model, studies, which is where we keep our analyses. These are some utilities that help us with working with models, both multi-body dynamics and finite element. And then the post tab, which is where we look at results. We'll get to that as we progress through this example. Usually the first thing we want to do is define the way our parts are connected. And so we have our creation tools here. If we needed to create geometry, we can create parametric primitives like we can in Adams View, or you can create sketches and create profiles, and then once you've got those profiles created, you can generate surfaces and solids, perform booleans, clean up imported geometry with defeaturing tools, modify geometry with push and pull. We'll show that a little bit later as well. And then there's some meshing controls. So when we need to do structural components or compliant parts in the context of multi-body dynamics, we can come in here and mesh them. Primarily you'll work with either solid meshing, which is tetrahedral, or a 2.5D mesh, which is where something is just an extrusion and we can mesh a face and it will extrude the mesh on that face, so into hexagonal and wedge elements. We have the ability to create interface points. An interface point is basically a marker plus a reference geometry. So it's a little bit more than a regular marker that you're familiar with in Adams, and that's why you'll see this little spider web coming out from the marker. So that's useful to know once you start doing more manual creation. Most of the interface points are generated for you automatically, so they're not something you have to work with or interact with initially with geometry-based definition. Create coordinate systems. Then we have a transform tool which enables us to move geometry or meshes on the screen. Then we have our joints, our motions, our forces, bushings and springs, ability to run simulation, and then under review we've got the ability to do stress recovery. So we'll show a few of these as we go through.